Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I'm driving home from the theater. And I don't want to make declarations too early. I don't want to write off things before they've really had a chance. But I have to admit, friends, that I'm starting to have real concerns about the state of the movies in 2026. As I've mentioned, I've been doing this for a number of years now, and I've noticed that these things tend to go in ebbs and flows. You have years where there's just a lot of really good stuff out, and then years where there's just a lot of mediocre, and years where there's a lot of bad. It's just kind of the natural ebb and flow, and I think that's true of any form of mass entertainment: movies, TV shows, music, video games. I watch other critics online, and I notice that there is that pattern that we kind of ease in and out. And again, I don't want to write this year off just yet, but I have to say, as of this recording, I've reviewed 5 movies, and the state of blandness in a lot of them is starting to generate some concern from me. So far, the majority of the films that I have watched this year have just been fairly bland. And I wasn't overly concerned at first, because most of the movies I had watched up to this point were, direct streaming films, and I don't hold a lot of hope for those in general. But this is kind of one of the first of them that went to theaters for the year. This is one of the first ones with a big-ish budget, a named, I guess we have to say, Chris Pratt is an A-lister. At this point, I kind of hate saying that, but I guess he kind of is. So a big star in a high-concept science fiction film. I mean, I would say this is one of Hollywood's kind of first out the gate, let's make a statement kind of films, and the statement is, So yeah. So with that in mind, let's talk about Mercy, the thing I was screaming for by the end of this film. So if you're not familiar with the premise of this movie, that's kind of amazing, because they've made sure that it's been the focal point of the marketing. And if you are hazy, they give you a wonderful bit of exposition commercial at the very beginning. So we are in what I assume is the not too distant future.
In the not too distant future.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow.
Why do you always have to say it that way?
It's kind of hard to tell, because we have this timeline of Los Angeles has incredible advances in AI and flying police motorcycles, but everything else looks exactly like it does right now. So I'm not exactly sure what year this is supposed to be taking place in, but I guess that really doesn't matter. But anyway, in this alternate timeline is basically the alternate timeline for 1996 in Demolition Man. The LA has just gone to crap. How they know, I'm not sure, but The criminals are just running rampant. They have certain red zones where they just kind of cordon off all the bad guys, kind of like Arkham City, you know. The criminals just don't fear the judicial system, and so the city enacts this AI court for the worst offenders. They don't use it all the time. They usually only use it when it's kind of a slam dunk, when they know the person is guilty, kind of thing. This AI court that, as the very chipper voice says, acts as judge, jury, and executioner. Yeah, so you know it's one of those movies when they have a cheerful voice saying something terrible. You know, this is one that they don't want the message to get away from you, but we're going to talk about that a little later. And into this, we meet our hero, Chris Pratt, playing Chris Raven. It's like, seriously? Okay. Who wakes up in the chair. He is a policeman who doesn't know why he's there, who can't figure out what's going on, and we are informed that he has been arrested for the murder of his wife and has an hour and a half to convince the AI judge, played by Rebecca Ferguson, of his innocence, or he's going to literally get the electric chair, the chair that he's sitting in. And he has access through plot convenience to every bit of cell phone, social media, security cams, everything in the city to scan and look for evidence and look for, clues and to build a case and to find out who really killed his wife. So so you see where this is going. So that is the premise. And again, don't worry, because if you're not clear on the premise, the movie explains it to you via a commercial right at the beginning. And I don't necessarily mind that. I don't mind when movies do that. I don't mind narrative exposition and flashback to kind of get us set up in the world. I don't mind that. But what I do mind is that we're shown that this is a commercial that is being played for the benefit of Chris Pratt in the chair just before his trial starts. The exposition commercial ends by saying, and this is why you're here. Now here's my question. In this society, this form of justice has become fairly famous and fairly commonplace, to the point where it's in its own fucking facility. It's a huge building where this AI is stored and these trials take place. Everybody knows about these things. Why the fuck would the person on trial need this exposition commercial? And this is a great place to kind of introduce us to things that I call the CinemaSins element of the story, and that is the stupid shit that happens that you scratch your head going, what? Why the fuck is that there? That take you completely out of the film. So there's that. The next one that I noticed, so Chris Pratt, like I said, he's in this chair. The whole movie is Chris Pratt in a chair. That's basically it until the climax. And this room obviously has holographic screens, because you know it's the future, because in the future they always have holographic screens, and having an actual screen on anything is so passé, even though apparently everyone still has cell phones that operate in the exact same way. So so the room is apparently equipped with all these holographic screens, because not only can he view multiple screens at once, but it can set up holographic projections of crime scenes and other locations for him to look around and, scout out clues and whatnot. Okay, fine and dandy. Here's my question. why the fuck do the holographic projections continue behind him? He is strapped to this chair. This chair is in the dead center of the room. We never see it move. It's not like it's on a track that can like slide back and forth and let him kind of scout around in real 3D holodeck kind of ways. He's in a stationary position. He can't even look behind him. So why the fuck are the holograms continuing behind him? I first noticed this right at the beginning when they're sending all this information at him and it's flying and it goes past him and continues like back towards the door, and I'm like, why would you do that? There's no reason. And then again, he constructs several 3D environments to examine, and they continue behind him. Why? That bugs the hell out of me. Now, you might be asking, why am I starting off with these points? Because these are relatively minor. And yes, I am on record. One of the things, having been a movie viewer all my life and an amateur movie critic for over a decade now, I've established certain rules about watching movies.
There are certain rules that one must abide by.
What about the rules?
And one of those rules are that there are going to be logic flaws. There are going to be holes in stories. There's going to be plot holes. There's going to be those things that you can nitpick. That's why I call them the cinema sins of the film. Every movie has them. But if the movie is good, if the movie is engaging, if the characters are real, if we're invested in the story, those nitpicks don't really matter. You see them, you acknowledge them, and you kind of go, I wonder why that, oh well, and then you kind of move on. And maybe they kind of hang in the back there for a second, or maybe they don't. But generally speaking, if the movie is good, these things don't bother you and don't stay at the forefront of your mind. But when the movie's not, these things tend to stick out and remain with you a lot longer because there's nothing else for you to grab onto. Case in point, I'll give you, this is the exact same thing in this movie and in another movie. They tell Chris Pratt that one of the reasons he was arrested, some of the evidence against him, is that his fingerprints were on the knife and on the plate and all this other stuff in the house where his wife was murdered. Yeah, because it's his fucking house. Why wouldn't his fingerprints be on shit? Like, that doesn't make any sense. There's a ton of other evidence they have against him that they could have just led with. But it's like, oh, your fingerprints are on the... Yeah, of course it was. He lived there. Now, I'm not a CSI or a criminologist or anything, but I would assume that if you came to my house and dusted for prints, you would find my fingerprints on pretty much everything. Because it's my goddamn house. Now, I bring this up because in another movie, the 1994 The Fugitive starring Harrison Ford, great fucking movie, great suspense thriller. That's one of the pieces of evidence that they used to convict him, is that his fingerprints were all over the gun and the bullets and everything else used to kill his wife. Yeah, because they were his. Now in that movie, yeah, that's an annoyance. It's something every time I see it, I'm like, well, that's dumb. But I immediately forget about it because the rest of the movie happens and the rest of the movie is fucking awesome. And you just kind of accept that's something they needed to get in there because they felt they needed to advance the plot. You know? But in this movie, it's another thing that sticks out like a sore thumb because nothing else about this movie works. It is just one of the dullest films that I have ever seen. From what should be a hypothetically interesting concept. Do you know what I felt like this would have been even better as than a movie? This felt like watching or playing an old video game, like an old way back, like an old PC game, or maybe even a Sega CD game, where you have to navigate all of these different camera shots and footage and find the clue and, you know, piece the puzzle together. I was reminded a lot, this dates me a lot. I was reminded a lot of playing Night Trap. Now, a lot of people hate Night Trap, and it had a real reputation back in the day. But I actually thought the basic premise of the game was pretty fascinating, and that is that it had all these security cameras, and you had to switch between them to find where the bad guy was and set the trap off, and, you know, all of that. And that's what this movie kind of reminds me of. And it's like, if this was a video game, it might have been something really interesting. But, and this again dates me, because I know we live in the world of Twitch, but I'm from one of the original generations of gamers, from the original Nintendo onward, where one of the hard and fast rules of being a video game player was that there were few things more boring than watching someone else play a video game. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're sitting here watching someone play a video game. And I know that Twitch is big business, but sorry folks, it just doesn't work for me. And that's kind of the thing with a lot of these. There have been a lot of this type of film. I know there's a name for them, but I can't remember what it is, because there was that War of the Worlds one that I reviewed last year. There's been a couple other ones about people going missing, and the whole film is all on the person's screen, and all we see is like the computer, like the webcam and the social media posts and all of that. And they just don't seem to do very well. They just don't seem to connect with an audience. And I think there's been enough of them now that we can ask why. And I think the reason why is there are too many barriers between the action and the audience. Now, there's already a barrier in that we're in an audience and the action is happening up on a screen. So that's already a barrier, but immersion can still happen. But as anybody who has a cell phone, who knows anybody who has a cell phone or a tablet or a computer or anything like that, you know that a screen in front of their face is a barrier between you and them. It's literally covering their faces most of the time. And so you can't have a connection with someone when there's a phone or a screen in front of them. In this movie, everybody except Chris Pratt is on a screen for 98% of the movie. So we can't connect to any of these characters. We can't really even identify a lot of these characters. We don't get really good shots of a lot of these characters. For instance, his daughter is a fairly pivotal character in the film. We could never get a decent shot of her. We can't tell how tall she is. We're not sure how old she is. So when they're showing stuff like she has a hidden Instagram account where she's putting up naughty videos, you're kind of starting to go, wait, how old is she? Is she 13? Is she 18? You know, what? You can't, because you have no frame of reference. You can't look at her next to anybody and kind of go, oh, you know. And you don't get any connections between anybody. You see videos of people having connections, but they're short snippets. They're Instagram or Reels or TikToks. You can't get an idea of someone's relationship through that. Putting having all your characters except one on a screen just distances your audience from them even more. And so now this movie does have them all come together and takes the action out into the world towards the end. Okay. But by then, it's too late. By then it's like, I don't care about these people. All right, I know I'm supposed to care for their situation, but I don't. Now, to be fair, let's say something nice. I do think the mystery as it unravels is decent. I do think it's a fairly interesting mystery of who did it, why they did it, how it all links back. I like that they make it a point to show that, I'm going to spoil this.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
But yes, spoiler alert, Chris Pratt didn't do it. I don't think anybody was going in there thinking he was guilty, which would have been an interesting twist, actually, if, he did this, he went through all this, and it turns out he really did do it. That would have been interesting. Might have been an interesting story to tell, but, we'll never know. But I like that they show that the guy who actually did do it, that he was planning this for a long time. This wasn't like a spur of the moment, that he... I don't know why I liked that. I guess because a lot of times you get some of these things and you're just like... I think of the example that jumps to mind is like Captain America Civil War. How did Baron Zemo know all of this was going to happen and everybody was going to react in just this way? And how did he... that's one of those things. But I do kind of like that they did take the time. So, no, he had a plan for a long time and, was very patient in it. So I appreciated that. The rest, we're in that classic era where we've been for the last several films that I've reviewed of, it's not bad, but there's nothing really good about it. There's nothing, I'm struggling to think. There's one other point I want to make, but in terms of everything else about this movie, the cinematography, the acting, the writing, I can't really comment because there's nothing really there to comment on. It's just there. It's just bland. And, I did not enjoy it. Did not enjoy it. But here's the other part. The last thing I kind of want to talk about on this one is, man, does it not know what it's trying to say. Because you have a feeling that a movie like this, it has a message.
Message for you, son.
Message!
And that's fairly clear going in. I think the fact that that they make a big point about it's an AI courtroom is setting up to say we're making a point, because the advancement in AI and its implementation is a big issue right now, especially as it relates to the entertainment industry. If you don't work in this industry, then you might not think that it's that big of a deal. You enjoy AI videos on TikTok or social media. AI lets people, compose songs and whatnot, which is cool. But it does have legitimate songwriters and actors and filmmakers kind of going, that's not good for us. And it has the industry kind of asking, why are we paying actors multi-billion dollars, salaries sometimes, when we can program it into this and get it for free or for way less? Or the same thing with writers. Writers have that same fear. So, having Hollywood come out with a film where AI is being implemented in a way where they try to make it look like it's the best way of the future. You know, look at all the great things it's doing. Look how it's brought down criminal intent and, you know, and all of this, and violent crimes are down. And to then, throughout the film, make that point of it doesn't have the humanity, it makes mistakes, it's not as good as a genuine person looking and making deductions and going with their gut. They make a big point of that. You know, he's going with his gut, and the AI, Rebecca Ferguson, is I don't understand. That is illogical. In other words, reenacting countless episodes of Star Trek with Data, Spock, Seven of Nine, and now Sam on Starfleet Academy. You know, which I would recommend going and watching any of those over this. So, okay, I can see that that's maybe where they're going. But then they kind of switch on that, and then Rebecca Ferguson AI starts to go with her gut and starts to tweak because she starts to believe him and is questioning her own logic. So, and then by the end, it's like she's working with Chris Pratt. So you're like, wait, are we saying that maybe AI is not bad, it's just the way we use it, and we need to use it as a tool and not as a substitute? Okay, all right, fair enough. But then it switches again. Again, spoiler alert, don't really care, that it turns out all of this was set into motion because an actual flesh and blood cop didn't file evidence because they wanted the AI system to work and become prevalent and didn't care about the consequences. So did it suddenly switch to a question of corruption and of bad law enforcement, or is that back to the point of people using and manipulating the AI incorrectly, and that starts all this bad? What the fuck are you trying to say, movie? And before anybody gets on my case about this, I know I am a longtime sci-fi fan, longtime Star Trek fan, love Planet of the Apes. I get that not every allegory is a direct one-to-one, or is it always necessarily 100% clear? Sometimes you have to think about it. So I understand that, but there is a difference between a think piece and your own message getting muddied up in so many other offshoots that in the end you end up saying nothing of substance. If your goal was to get me to think about this, I guess in a way it succeeded, but it also failed because I'm not thinking about it going, oh, that's a really good point. You know, I find I'm doing that now when I watch Starfleet Academy. I'm watching going, oh, no, that's a neat allegory. Didn't think of that, but that's a neat kind of, you know, that's how it's done. This is just the message on message, but then the message goes over here, and then we need a plot twist, so it goes over that way. Yeah, me thinking about your message is not getting me closer to enlightenment. It's getting me closer to throwing a brick through the screen, which I don't think is the result you were looking for, movie. So yeah, it's just a mess. The whole movie is a mess, and any goodwill it kind of garnered from a decent mystery and an interesting concept are just lost by heavy-handedness, confusion on its own premise, and or not actually following through on the cleverness of its own premise. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's certainly not good. It's not memorable in the right ways, and I can almost guarantee you by the end of the year when I'm going through my list, looking back at everything I've reviewed over the past year, it's going to be one of those I'm like, what the fuck happened in that movie? So, yeah. So there you have it. I don't know what else to say on this one. I really don't. So I'm just not going to say anything. Let's wrap this up. So final grade for Mercy. I'm going to be merciful. And I'm going to give it a C-. Now that might seem weird given that I've said very little of positive examples in this review, but I do appreciate the fact, I do think the movie was trying. I do think it was trying to do some things different. It was trying to have a point. It was trying to do something interesting. And I recognize attempt. I recognize that the intention was good. The follow-through just didn't work for whatever reason. So I do, and again, there's nothing incompetent in this. There's nothing, like, I wasn't rage quitting, but there was nothing to really hold my interest either. So yeah, I think a C- is kind of exactly what this one deserves. So there you go. There you have it. So, yeah, like I said, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned for this year. But next week, we do have something big coming out. A new entry in a franchise I'm a big fan of and has never really let me down. They've always been entertaining to varying degrees. So maybe the year is about to pick up. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I just hope so for my sake. So, but thank you all. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for listening. Hope you're all doing well. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.